All right. I think we are ready to get started. Everyone, this is King, Congressman DeLauro's Comms Director. I just want to ask that if you are not speaking, that you stay muted. And for members of the press joining us today, there will be an opportunity for questions at the end. So if you have questions, please use the raise hand feature and we will call on you to ask your question. With that, I'll turn it over to the Congresswoman.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for joining today. It's great to be with you. Our colleague, Earl Blumenauer, who has been the champion on this issue, has gone to vote in the Ways and Means Committee. He will be back shortly, and Tom Suozzi is on, who will be carrying the torch going forward on Earl's great de minimis bill. Let me also recognize Kevin Roy from Shatterproof, Andy Edmiston from the National Association of Police Organizations, Kim Glass of the National Council of Textile Organizations, Lori Wallach of Rethink Trade, and I guess it was one additional person here. So is that Jean? There we go. Hi, thank you, NTEU. All of the organizations have recognized the importance of ending the de minimis exception, and I'm grateful for the consistent advocacy on such a crucial issue. The loophole is something of a misnomer. These days, it no longer functions as it was meant to be. For example, to allow American tourists returning from travel to bring their souvenirs into the country duty-free. In the modern age of direct-to-consumer e-commerce and ubiquitous global shipping, it has become a vast gap in our national customs regime. The gap allows packages valued at under $800, which is a vast share of private e-commerce purchases, amounting to nearly $4 million packages per day, to enter the United States without paying duties and with no inspection or information disclosure about the contents. The economic incentives of this creates, they're clear. It encourages foreign companies to make a vast amount of cheap products for tax-free shipping to the United States. It results in the flood of impossibly low-priced products that put American manufacturers out of business and workers out of jobs. Since the de minimis exemption also makes it almost impossible to enforce the ban on forced labor goods, it is a near certainty that products made in unethical conditions, such as by Uyghur workers who have been identified by the State Department as experiencing human rights abuses, are entering the United States using this loophole. Increasingly, the gap has been exploited by international drug traffickers to send dangerous substances like fentanyl through the mail. It's hidden in small packages. It sails right through the inspections. As we are dealing with a nationwide opioid epidemic that claimed over 80,000 lives last year from overdoses alone, it is simply too dangerous to allow these substances another route to flow freely into our country. The full scale and scope of de minimis exploitation is still not fully known, but we have clear evidence that it is leading to dangerous substances entering the country, undercutting the competitiveness of many American industries, especially small clothing manufacturers, while enabling human rights abuses abroad. This is a multifaceted problem. It requires strength, capable enforcement plan to be able to fix it. And the plan needs real teeth, and it must be implemented quickly. That was exactly the plan that our colleague, Congressman Blumenauer, presented in his bill. The Import Security and Fairness Act, bipartisan bill, would have prohibited goods from non-market economies and other countries of concern from using de minimis, and would have required Customs and Border Protection to collect more information on all de minimis shipments. The bill has been endorsed by industry groups, trade unions alike, but despite its broad and bipartisan support, House Republicans have blocked any meaningful action on the issue thus far. Once again, we need to turn to the Biden administration to act when the House majority refuses to govern. The letter we are releasing today outlines exactly why the White House must use its authority to make meaningful changes to the issue. Congress provided the executive branch with broad discretion to designate what products may qualify for de minimis treatment in Section 321 of the Tariff Act of 1930. As long as the legislative solution is stonewalled, we're urging President Biden to use the full range of his authority to disqualify commercial shipments from de minimis treatment so that 4 million packages per day can no longer avoid paying what they owe or complying with U.S. law. The time has long since passed to close this de minimis gap. And our colleague, Earl Blumenauer, has been the leader on this issue, and let me turn it over to Earl.
Oh, you're on mute, Earl.
Thank you so much, Rosa. It's great to work with you on this and my other colleagues and friends on this call. We know the de minimis loophole is ravaging our communities. We know drug dealers are ordering fentanyl and fentanyl precursors online, shipping them directly from China into the United States under the de minimis threshold. And it's not just fentanyl, as if that weren't bad enough. We have exploding e-bike batteries. We have clothing made with slave labor, deadly toys for children. There's no question that this loophole undercuts American workers, manufacturers, retailers, and threatens our health and safety. This ought to be a top priority for the Biden administration. There are a number of executive actions that would dramatically limit, if not altogether end, the deadly impact of de minimis on our communities. Congress gave the executive branch broad discretion to designate what products qualify for de minimis treatment. It's time for the Biden administration to use that power to stop the flow of harmful products entering our communities. These are bipartisan priorities: standing up to China, protecting American workers and consumers, halting the fentanyl crisis. Now, I'm still optimistic that we have a chance for a legislative solution in this Congress. We find that some of my Republican colleagues are waking up to the fact that this is a serious action and are supportive. We have some action from the Senate with moves by Chairman Wyden on de minimis. But we're nonetheless in an extraordinarily difficult legislative environment. We shouldn't leave it to chance, rolling the dice on what we may be able to get through when the administration has the capacity to take action to limit this problem. I appreciate my colleagues being a part of this. I look forward to working with the administration to deal with this urgent issue that is broadly supported, that has bipartisan support, a legislative solution, and administrative action. These are the menus of things that we ought to choose from, and I hope that we do.
Thanks very much to you, Congressman Blumenauer, for really being the leader on this effort. And now it's a pleasure to recognize our colleague, Congressman Tom Suozzi, who is, as I said at the outset, going to be carrying the torch going forward on the de minimis legislation.
Well, thank you very much, Rosa. I'm hoping that Earl is right and we get it done this Congress and he puts me out of a job so that we'll get it done this term instead of waiting for me to work on it next term. But I just want to put this in simple language for some of the ladies and gentlemen of the press that are joining us here today. You know, we work very hard to negotiate trade deals. And some of the things that are important to the people on this call are the protections for labor in the countries that we trade with, protections for the environment for the countries that we deal with. Then there are issues related to tariffs that we go through, you know, all this work goes through on tariffs and duties, and there's all kinds of things that are set up related to protections to American companies and consumers. Then there's inspections. People inspect the goods when they come through our ports of entry. And there's also other legislation that we've done that was referenced earlier, something I worked very hard on in the last Congress, which is the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which said that we know that in Xinjiang, a region of China, a Muslim minority of people that live there, the Uyghurs, are put in forced labor camps and are subject to things like forced sterilization and surveillance and a whole bunch of other rotten things. And so we said, as a Congress, anything that comes from the Xinjiang region of China is presumed to be being made with forced labor. And we don't want it here in the United States of America. We don't want people to use it. So we have all these laws. We have trade deals, we have tariffs, we have duties, we have inspections, we have the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, and a whole bunch of things I'm not even mentioning that are set up to protect U.S. companies and consumers so that they're not subjected to goods that violate all the values that we have in the United States of America. Well, some very clever people from the Chinese Communist Party and elsewhere have come up with ways to get around all the stuff that we've negotiated over a long period of time. They figured out how to use the new e-commerce systems for you to order goods from China that are not subject to tariffs, are not subject to environmental and labor rules, are not subject to inspection when they come through the ports, are not subject to this elaborate system we've set up over a long period of time because they are de minimis. They're under $800, and then they come in through the mail, not through the ports of entry. Nobody inspects it. Nobody pays any tariffs. Nobody makes sure they're not being made with forced labor in the Xinjiang region. Nobody does the things we've worked on for so long. And because it's now exploded in such an enormous amount, this is affecting us in America in very serious ways. There are textile companies that made it through the changes of the 80s and 90s that are now closing down. Over the past, somebody told me the other day, 8 textile companies closed down within 5 months here in America. That's U.S. jobs, it's U.S. business. We don't want to see that happening. But because of the competition of these goods being sold under the de minimis rule, not going through any inspection or tariffs or duties or anything else, they're putting us out of business. In addition, there are precursors to fentanyl that's killing our kids, killing our family, that are being sent in these small packages and these under $800 amounts that are being used to manufacture fentanyl that are killing people. And there are other things that are coming into our country that just are not subject to this elaborate effort we've made over a long period of time to protect the environment, to protect our employees, to protect our children, to protect our consumers, to protect our companies. So we want to try and fix that. And we want to say that these goods that come in, even though they may be worth under $800, have to be subjected to some sort of inspection regime. So you do have to do the paperwork, and you do have to do the proper things that we've established over many years. So we have bipartisan legislation that Earl is responsible for crafting, that he's asking me to take over if we don't get it done by January. And we got to build our bipartisan team to get it done. But in the meanwhile, we're saying, President Biden, you have some authority to do things that can protect us. Please use that authority and help us to get this done. Okay, so that's the bottom line. This is so important. This is about our families. This is about our children. This is about our workers. This is about the environment. This is about our country. So thank you so much for including me in this effort, Rosa and Earl, and we'll continue to work on this to make sure that we protect the people that we need to protect here in our country.
Thanks so much, Congressman Suozzi. Thank you. And I too hope we can get it done. But if not, we know as somebody who's very competent pulling this through. I might add there are 126 signatures to the letter, which is really outstanding. Let me now ask Kevin Roy to speak up, Chief Public Policy Officer at Shatterproof.
Thank you for the introduction. Shatterproof is a national nonprofit who's at the forefront of addressing the most pressing public health crisis in the country, addiction. And we are part of the De Minimis Coalition that aims to address this issue because really preventing fentanyl from entering the country has to be a national priority. And so this legislation, and I want to thank Representative DeLauro, Blumenauer and Suozzi as well for organizing this event and making sure that we highlight this along with the 126 members of Congress, as Representative DeLauro mentioned, who have signed the bipartisan letter, so that the administration, can consider it a very high priority in the waning days here of this year. I hear from parents all the time that their child died of a fentanyl, overdose or poisoning, and what this policy aims to redress is making that less likely to happen. And we've met parents in this coalition who've shared that their child accessed fentanyl through international shipping, which this policy is aimed to address as well. And so we know that this billion packages or so that come through this means every year is a real problem. We know that fentanyl is a real crisis in the country, and that these packages really should be scrutinized the way under federal law, the way any other package is, as a way to address that. In terms of this policy, obviously there's much more that needs to be done to address addiction. We need treatment and information on treatment quality and reducing the stigma around getting treatment. We need a renewed focus on prevention. And one of our volunteer ambassadors, Dina Loudon, is doing just that. She lost her son, Matthew, as a result of fentanyl. And she is spending her time sharing the dangers and sharing information and educating kids and those that are reaching adulthood about the dangers of fentanyl. And we need fewer people that are in that situation where they are unfortunately sharing following the loss of a loved one. But Dina is sharing this to honor Matthew, who was a hockey player, had many friends, and was a good student. And this policy is really aimed to, from our perspective, to make sure that there's fewer mothers that are in that situation where they need to share the tragic loss. So again, thank you for the work to highlight this policy and for those in the coalition. And it's been my pleasure to be here.
Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate, the advocacy on the area and a very poignant reality in what's happening to families. So now let me ask the National Association of Police Organizations, here, Andy Edmiston, Director of Government Affairs.
Thank you, Congresswoman. The National Association of Police Organizations represents over 241,000 sworn law enforcement officers across the country. The spread of fentanyl in our communities is devastating. Fentanyl is now the drug most associated with overdoses in the United States. This deadly poison is being mixed with other illicit drugs, hidden in counterfeit drugs, and being peddled at alarmingly high rates to our nation's youth. 7 out of 10 counterfeit prescription drugs seized by law enforcement in the last year were laced with a deadly amount of fentanyl. As law enforcement officers, our members are on the front lines. They see firsthand the devastating impact of fentanyl has on our communities. Our officers work hard to keep it and other dangerous opioids off the streets and out of our neighborhoods. Yet daily, officers respond to fentanyl overdoses. American law enforcement is fighting a losing battle if Chinese drug smugglers can continue to circumvent our trade laws and ship hundreds of thousands of packages of fentanyl directly into our country with a click of a button. The de minimis loophole is severely exacerbating the opioid crisis and contributing to deaths in our country by allowing fentanyl, other illegal opioids, and related contraband to enter our market duty-free and largely uninspected. A prime example of how drug traffickers are using the de minimis loophole is the DEA and HSI announced on July 22nd that they indicted a Chinese national for his part in the importation of what is believed to be one of the largest amount of fentanyl precursors found in the country. The defendant and his associates allegedly shipped over 2,000 kilograms of fentanyl precursor chemicals from China into the United States, enough fentanyl precursor chemicals to kill millions of Americans. The illicit drugs were mailed in approximately 100 separate shipments and were able to avoid law enforcement interdiction by declaring them to have de minimis value of less than $800 and intermixing the boxes containing the precursor chemicals with other de minimis items. Once the packages were in the United States, they were then shipped to Mexico to be used in the manufacturing of fentanyl. While these traffickers were brought to justice by joint law enforcement operation, many, many more escaped justice due to the de minimis loophole. NAPO strongly believes that closing the de minimis loophole will help staunch the flow of illicit narcotics coming across our borders and help safeguard the lives of our children, our families, and our friends. So we are proud to stand with Representatives DeLauro, Blumenauer, and Suozzi and the 126 members of Congress who signed on to the letter calling on President Biden to use his executive authority to close the de minimis loophole now. So thank you very much for your efforts, and we stand ready to finish this fight this Congress.
Thank you very much. And along with you and with Shatterproof and the perspective of law enforcement in this effort, that's really critical in terms of the broad coalition that in effect supports the closing of this de minimis loophole here. And Kim Glass, President, CEO of National Council of Textile Organizations. What a story you have to tell, Kim, on all of this and what's happened to a major industry in this great nation.
You know, Congresswoman DeLauro, Congressman Blumenauer, and Suozzi, thank you so much for your incredible leadership and for all that signed on to this very timely and urgent letter. I can't amplify this enough. The U.S. textile industry is facing a 5-alarm fire. We have lost 18 plants over the last year. 18 plants that converted their operations literally overnight during COVID-19 when the country didn't have life-saving PPE and nurses were wearing garbage bags and medical technicians were reusing N95 masks. So when a U.S. textile plant goes down, it is a strategic industry. We are here to be part of the front lines along with nurses and doctors, and we supply our U.S. military with the capabilities to do their job on the ground. So we are not forced to use products from offshore, from adversary nations in a time of conflict. There are over 4 million de minimis packages coming in a day, and half of those are estimated to be textile and apparel. Half of them, 2 million a day, uninspected packages that are duty-free coming to our door and often in violation of our labor and environmental laws, including the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which overwhelmingly passed the U.S. Congress. It avoids tariffs, it avoids penalty tariffs, and is rewarded by an outdated trade law from the 1930s that is facilitating all of this to our door. It's one thing to lose a U.S. textile plant, but having our coalition partners here, Andy Edmonston, Kevin Roy, it's another to lose a family member. This has become a black market of trade to the U.S. market, putting our consumers at risk, our communities at risk. I worry about the next day. I know more textile plants will be shuttered. There's a sense of urgency right now to get this done. I appreciate the leadership of the Democratic caucus for sending this letter to President Biden, asking him to use the authorities. We also are urgently asking Congress to develop bipartisan, forward-leaning legislation. We support the Blumenauer bill to have meaningful reform to ensure that this does not happen, does not threaten our economy, our people, our workers, and the people who've been victims of the fentanyl crisis. So please know we are active in this. We're the most impacted manufacturing industry. There's other manufacturers who are also impacted, as well as American retailers. And we are with you in this fight. So thank you so much and appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you for your passion on this issue. And there's been a lot of articles written about this and so forth, and what's happened, as I said, to a major industry in the United States. So, and let me now ask Lori Wallach, Director of Rethink Trade, to speak to us.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman DeLauro, and many thanks to the members of Congress with us today. Kudos to all of the 126 members of the House of Representatives who have asked the president to take administrative action to fix the de minimis disaster. That is truly a growing threat to Americans' lives and well-being, and to the future of our manufacturing, to our brick and mortar retailers, and to our workers. Given the House GOP have to date blocked Mr. Blumenauer's good bill, it is urgent for the executive branch, for President Biden to take immediate action, as this letter requests, using his existing authority to stop what is a true crisis, but actually is an unusually fixable one. The good news is that Congress previously granted an American president broad discretion and authority to determine what types of goods can enter using de minimis, and explicitly in the statute did so as to prevent unlawful imports. When Congress updated our customs laws in 2015, they did not alter that broad authority, thankfully. So as a result, while Congress said the de minimis threshold is $800, the executive branch decides what kinds of things are allowed to enter that way and skirt all inspection, tariffs, taxes, and trade enforcement. The bad news is these regulations were set in 1994, well before the advent of mass direct-to-consumer e-commerce. So we have 1994 regulations that have allowed some entities like Shein and Temu to be created solely to exploit this loophole, and as a result now have 4 million packages coming in daily. That means it's impossible to inspect, and no amount of additional information or investment in more inspectors will ever catch up to that. What we need is to reduce the volume of these packages. This was never intended for commercial use. And so as these members in this letter request, thankfully, because of the statute, President Biden has the authority to decide by regulation that de minimis will no longer apply to e-commerce packages. That's the ask in the letter. And in doing so, will update what is this very outdated policy that now poses such high risks and threats to Americans' health and safety. When there are that many packages coming in, it's very easy for illicit goods like fentanyl and precursors to be slipped in. But as well, the goods that are coming in are violating a huge range of US laws. And if these imports were coming in a containerized regular import formal landing system, which is what would happen, it wouldn't be a cutoff of the imports, but a different way of doing it, then things like our Safe Ports Act would apply. And advance information would have to be filed. Things would get to get pulled and inspected. It would be a much safer environment. So thank you to the members for this leadership. And I urge the administration to take this action they have the ability to use.
Thanks so much, Laurie. You know, your treasure trove of knowledge and your work in terms of trade and understanding the nuances of the legislation, the authorities, et cetera. We're so grateful. And you think and rethink trade every single day. So thanks so much. And now I'd like to ask Heidi Teen, NTEU, president of NTEU. And it's chapter 155, I think, Heidi. They represent employees in Ohio, in Kentucky, and Indiana. So please, let's hear from you.
Thank you, Congresswoman DeLauro. For federal law enforcement officers like me who work at the ports, it is incredibly frustrating to watch helplessly as millions of international packages that could contain fentanyl and other contraband evade inspection every day because of this language in the law. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers that I represent through the National Treasury Employees Union, NTEU, strongly support the efforts by Representative DeLauro and others to close the de minimis exemption and allow me and my colleagues to do our job to protect Americans from deadly substances and American companies from unfair competition. CBP employees would intercept more international shipments of fentanyl if the threshold for exempting certain packages from inspection was lowered and the agency was able to hire the necessary law enforcement professionals to do the work. But none of this works if we don't have enough officers on the job. CBP's own model shows that they need almost 6,000 more officers to meet the workload demands at air, sea, and land ports of entry. In addition to changing the de minimis standard, we hope that Congress will also consider providing the funding needed to ramp up hiring as soon as possible so that more packages and shipments can be thoroughly inspected and processed. NTEU represents CBP employees at 328 ports of entry and strongly endorses efforts to change the de minimis threshold that allows millions of international packages to evade inspection at these ports. But Congress must also provide sufficient funding to increase hiring and alleviate the staffing shortages that impact port operations and overextends our workforce. The $800 de minimis exemption allows allegedly low-value packages to enter duty-free and to bypass full inspections. Drug traffickers and foreign companies have exploited it to avoid detection and tariffs. The result is illegal fentanyl is being delivered directly to American addresses and unfair competition for our American companies. Sending more international shipments through inspection is obviously key. But it won't matter much if there aren't enough trained CBP employees on duty to process them. Frontline CBP employees are frustrated because they know for a fact that they could stop more dangerous substances from reaching the streets if they had the right tools to do the job. Fentanyl and fentanyl precursors manufactured in China are either funneled through Mexico in regular cargo or sent by mail and express consignment operators directly to addresses in the United States. But CBP staffing has not kept the pace with the increase in packages. CBP seizures of fentanyl increased by more than 200% over the last 2 fiscal years. CBP officials in April testified that the agency processes about 4 million de minimis or low-value packages per day, up from 2.8 million at the same point last year. The agency needs 5,850 additional CBP officers and 3,946 mission and operational support staff, according to its own workload staffing model. So thank you today for the opportunity to share the perspective of the frontline law enforcement officers on this important issue, and know that we support this legislative change.
Thanks so much, Heidi. I failed to mention when introducing you that you've got 33 years of experience as a CBP, officer. So thank you for that perspective. One of the things I'm struck by is the range of not of interest, but of concerns, whether it's manufacturing and industry, workers and unions, law enforcement community. And we hear so much these days about border security over and over and over again, and fentanyl coming across, the border. And then when you speak out, that amazing that we can see a bill by Congressman Blumenauer that would address this issue that is being blocked in the House of Representatives by Republican colleagues. So with that, let me open it up to the press.
I am seeing a question from Phelan with Politico. Phelan, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much for doing this. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder if you could comment on the fact that this is Speaker Johnson's sort of long anticipated China week. Obviously, the de minimis bipartisan legislation has been worked on for a long time, but it's not making it through this, or hasn't been selected for this particular legislative push. What do you make of that decision or omission? And what does it say about the seriousness of Speaker Johnson in trying to have meaningful bipartisan legislation to address such an important issue? Thank you.
Well, I'll speak and anybody else can, and Thomas, I think you answered your own question. I think there's a lack of seriousness about what are the pieces of legislation or what are the public policy initiatives that we can enact that in fact would have a dramatic impact on China and what's being sent through, what's being sent through the mails here. I mean, you've got a whole bunch of other issues, but one that has bipartisan support, one that has broad support industry-wide, and with a particular issue, as I just said, I didn't know you were going to ask this question, but they're being consumed with the border issues in the way that my Republican colleagues are, and there's very good reason to be concerned about border issues, and we have a piece of legislation that can address in a very robust way the fentanyl coming across the border. This could solve a lot of both economic and social issues and problems that we currently have, but it in fact is omitted. It tells you something about the resolve of the majority in the House. So anyone else? Tom?
Let me just say that this is a pattern and practice that we're noticing from our Republican colleagues, especially this year. Earlier in the year, we had this big bipartisan bill negotiated in the Senate to secure the border of the southern border. The more border agents, more immigration judges, build more wall, change the asylum system to make it more difficult to seek asylum at the southern border and between the ports of entry. So many different things supported by, it was negotiated by one of the most conservative members of the Senate, along with Chris Murphy in the Senate, Democrat, and Kirsten Sinema in the Senate, supported by the president. He helped negotiate it with his team. Then it was supported by Mitch McConnell. He doesn't support anything. He supported it. And then you had the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. You had the president of the Border Patrol Union supported it. He's a big Trumper. And then what happened? President Trump swooped in and said, I don't want to give Biden a victory. I want to run on the chaos. And the whole thing was sabotaged. Well, this is another example. Here you see this broad, a bipartisan coalition on Earl's bill, negotiated very heavily. You see the people speaking on this call that represent such a broad coalition, that represent families that are suffering with the fentanyl crisis, textile companies that are closing, law enforcement that sees this happening on a regular basis, trade experts that see consumers and companies in America getting ripped off. You see everybody united. Customs Border Patrol agents, again, concerned about this. They see this every day at their jobs. This is a practical, everyday solution that will have an impact on real people's lives. And much like the Senate bipartisan bill on the southern border, we've got the bill, we've got the legislation. We can't get it off the dime because of politics, not because of policy, because of politics. And we've got to instead seek executive orders, which the president did on the southern border to help to diminish the flow of people crossing the border dramatically. But this executive order, hoping we can get it done, will also have a dramatic impact. But everybody knows that the real answer is to get legislation done. And we need to move beyond this hyperbole and histrionics and performance politics that doesn't actually accomplish anything. And we have to actually just do the hard work, build the coalitions, Democrats and Republicans working together to actually solve problems to make people's lives better. I know this issue pretty well. I've researched it. Just listening to our press conference today, I'm even more impassioned that we have to get this done, because I'm listening to all the different parties that have been brought together for the press conference. And I'm like, wow, we have such a great coalition of people that recognize how important this is. And we just need to convince our colleagues that, this is what we were hired for. We're in the solutions business. We're not in the, get me a bunch of likes business on the internet. So let's make people's lives better and let's get this done. And then, let me just, I'm sorry. A lot of the stuff we see for the China week are not going to get done. They're not bipartisan. They haven't been negotiated. They're just kind of like rammed through. So this is something that's bipartisan, broad coalition. People want to do it. Credible people are endorsing it. Come on. Okay. I'm excited now.
All right, we'll turn things over to Oliver Ward with Inside Trade. Oliver, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thanks for doing this. My question is for the lawmakers on the call. There was reporting that there's been initial talks with Republicans over a possible compromise bill on de minimis reform, including with Ways and Means Chair Jason Smith. I was wondering if those talks have broken down or what the status of those are.
We've got to get Earl to get back on the call to tell us the answer to that. Earl would be the one negotiating that. So I don't have a good answer for that. I don't know if DeLauro, Rosa.
No, I don't either. I think that really is, Earl's bailiwick. I don't know if anybody else does. Knows anything? No. Okay. Sorry.
Sorry, Oliver.
Do we have any more questions?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very, very much. To
Sorry,
all, we
this
will
is-
continue the debate, the dialogue, will continue to push. Always. Thank you so much.
Lori and Andy and Heidi and Kim and Kevin, I really want to stay in touch with you guys. So I'm going to need your help to reassemble this group to push this stuff if we want to try and get this legislation done this year or early next year, okay? So going to need your help. So Rosa, your team can help me get all their contacts.
Absolutely. This is this is the brain trust here.
This is a great group.
And 126 members, 126 members signed on to this letter. That tells you something about, where members are coming from. And on this piece, we got a bipartisan piece of legislation. This is something that needs to get done. So thank you. Thanks one and all.
Thank you.
Before
Nice
you go,
to Kim.
before you go, Gavin, were you trying to ask a question?
Hey, all. Yeah, sorry for the delay
Oh.
on that. Not been able to use my raise hand function here. I did have a question about those negotiations with Smith as well. So we reported yesterday that that he had proposed cutting out the apparel sector from de minimis eligibility completely. So no apparel products would be able to access the de minimis program. I wonder if anyone has feelings about that policy proposal, whether the lawmakers or Kim here from McDo as well. This was in a meeting with Congressman Blumenauer yesterday. I wanted to ask him about it, but clearly he's dropped off the call.
Gavin, I can't comment on a proposal I haven't seen or reported in the press, but NCTO is strongly supporting Mr. Blumenauer's bill, which would remove de minimis from Chinese products. We also strongly support the bipartisan Senator Wyden bill, which would exclude sensitive products from de minimis treatment and make fentanyl a priority trade issue. So, but I can't comment on a proposal I have not seen.
Let me just say that, of course, the fentanyl is a major issue and that's got to be addressed. And we know that has to be done, and that's a big priority. But the textile issue is a major issue as well. We set up these huge trade agreements. We negotiate these things. We set up this whole panoply of federal legislation to protect our consumers, to protect our industries, to protect the environment, to protect the labor, to protect the Uyghurs. I mean, we do all these things. Why would we want to allow something to slip through a crafty way using direct-to-consumer online sales? Why would we want to let that be a way to circumvent all this lattice work of protections we've set up over a long period of time? Doesn't make any sense. I mean, I'll ask Jason Smith, why? Does it not bother you that the textile companies are closing down, that people are losing their jobs? Do you like the idea that the forced labor could possibly be used? Because the main product produced in the Xinjiang region is cotton and textiles. That's where it comes from in China. So, I mean, why would you want to exclude textiles? Maybe there's some American interest that you're trying to protect that I don't know about, but it doesn't, on its face, it doesn't seem to make sense.
I'm sorry, Congressman, perhaps I wasn't clear. He was saying that apparel and textile products would not be able to use de minimis eligibility, so they would be excluded from the program. Tariffs and normal customs procedures would have to apply to them. That was apparently the compromise proposal he put on the table yesterday.
Okay, well, we need to take a look at what that is before anybody can reasonably comment on it and know what the details are, so.
Kevin, I gave such a good speech and the whole thing was wrong.
It was good, and you made a very good point, but I think we need to see the legislation here, what he's proposing.
I see
Well,
Anna Swanson from the New York Times.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I thought I'd just sneak in a quick one here. So I wanted to ask too, what are the consequences of not doing this now, but maybe instead waiting to do something this year? Because it seems like kind of a moving target in terms of what the economic implications of this might be for various businesses. Businesses are having to adapt all the time, right? So if somebody just wanted to, have a quick comment on kind of the timing aspect of it or the importance of that. Thanks.
The point is we have if we could move it now, we would do that. It would make enormous sense given the issues involved and the broad array of support around it, a bipartisan piece of legislation to move forward on. It would just seem as if we could get it done. That would be the right thing to do in order to address what is a very serious problem. I mean, this is not a problem just in the US. This is a problem internationally. You're looking at South Africa, you're looking at UK, they're addressing the issue of de minimis. They're closing the loophole down, so this is not just an issue for us. I think the faster we can move, the better off we will be, the better off our economy will be, and clearly the better off we will do to be able to save lives in this country. So let's move now.
And so Anna, I don't know if you were on earlier when I was talking about the similarities of this to the bipartisan bill that we did on the border, that the Senate did on the border that was not moved forward. I mean, it's the same thing. Our colleagues will say this is a crisis. This is an emergency. The border's an emergency. It's a crisis. Oh, we're not going to do it now. We're going to wait to see if we win in the elections. Fentanyl, it's an emergency. It's a crisis. Oh, no, we want to wait. It's China week. We got to do all these things in China. Oh, no, we're going to wait on this thing. Oh, the textile companies are closing. People are going out of business. Oh, it's an emergency. Oh, we're going to wait to get it done. I mean, it's been negotiated. I mean, let's do it. Let's go.
If I can just add one thing, to me, what has become the most compelling reason and why I really thank the members who sent this letter for urgent action. If the legislative route is going to remain blocked, then the executive action, something has to happen, because I have become educated through the Coalition to Stop De Minimis about people's kids dying every day as these fentanyl-laced pills are sneaking in. And it's not off of like the dark web. People are on what look like totally legit websites. They are working 3 jobs, so they can't get to the doctor. They think they're getting their normal muscle relaxer for their sprung back. And the next thing you know, they don't wake up. And the notion of these entirely unsafe goods coming in, the notion of, another of these plants that made the masks and the surgical gowns and turning a dime in our domestic remaining textile sector, dozen plus of them shutting down. This has to be stopped now, and it's a fixable problem. And just to make very clear, because Congresswoman DeLauro spot on, the EU, the European Commission, has decided they are ending de minimis entirely in 2025. South Africa, Brazil, other countries, and here is the mismatch. And this is why it's so urgent to take action. Our 1994 regulations allow what's called the importer of record to be the consumer. So companies like Shein and Temu, who, again, 4 million of these uninspected packages every day, they never get the $800 peak, even though they are sending in any given day tens of millions of dollars of stuff, because the person who's importing is considered the consumer. So in Europe, they're not just shutting down the loophole, they're also explicitly making the e-commerce platforms the importer of record for all packages that come off of sales on there. And that would help enormously for the very brave frontline workers who are customs inspectors to actually, have a chance to get the information and have a volume of packages when properly staffed to stay on top of what's literally a deadly problem. I'm a trade wonk. I hate what's happening as far as the evasion of our trade laws. But what's really happening every damn day that this loophole is not closed is people are dying. Our ability to respond to crises is being destroyed with plants being shut down that are not going to get reopened. And this is fixable. That's the urgency on them.
Okay, thank you. Thanks all very, very much.
Good job, Lori.
So we'll just keep at it. Thanks. Take care.